The passenger pigeon's demise is a sad illustration of what occurs when man's interests collide with those of nature. This species is said to have formerly made up 25 to 40% of the entire bird population in the United States. When Europeans found America, it is believed that there were 3 billion to 5 billion passenger pigeons. In this video we'll talk about passenger pigeon, ectopistes migratorius. Stay tuned and watch the video till end. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you want to hear more from us. Passenger pigeons were commonly referenced in the literature of early explorers and settlers. One of the last recorded recordings of a wild bird catch was made in 1900. At this point, just a few birds remained in captivity. There were coordinated searches and awards provided for the capture of wild passenger pigeons. The American Ornithologists Union paid $1.500 to anybody who discovered a nest or nesting colony. The order Columbiformes includes passenger pigeons and wild pigeons. Ectopistes migratorius is its scientific name. Ectopistes means to move about or wander, and migratorius means to migrate. The scientific term implies a bird that not only migrates in the spring and autumn, but also wanders about from season to season to find the best habitat for breeding and foraging. The bird's physical beauty corresponded to its flying abilities of elegance, speed, and maneuverability. The head and neck were short, the tail was long and wedge-shaped, and the wings were long and pointed, driven by enormous breast muscles that allowed for extended flights. The male's average length was roughly 1,612 inches. The female was roughly an inch shorter than the male. The male pigeon's head and upper parts were a clear blue-gray, with black streaks on the scapulars and wing coverts. Patches of pinkish iridescence down the sides of the throat transformed into a gleaming metallic bronze, green, and purple in the rear of the neck. The lower neck and breast were a gentle rose color that faded to white in the lower belly. The irides were brilliant red, with a short, black and thin beak and beautiful lake red feet and legs. The female's hues were duller and paler. Her head and back were a brownish-gray tone. The iridescent patches on her throat and back of the neck were less vibrant, and her breast was a soft cinnamon rose color. The mourning dove, Zenatodora macrora, is a near cousin of the passenger pigeon, Ectopistes migratorius, in form and color. This has often resulted in incorrect identification and misleading reports of passenger pigeons long after they have become extinct. The adult male passenger pigeon's iris is brilliant red, while the female's is orange. A little black patch on the neck below and behind the ear of an adult mourning dove. This was not present in the passenger pigeon. The mourning dove produces a whistling sound with its wings as it rises in flight. The passenger pigeon's migratory flights were remarkable. Observers observed that massive flocks of birds flew above, darkening the sky. The birds went out in vast groups in the morning, exploring the countryside for food. When the food supply ran out or the weather became bad, the birds would create a new roosting spot. Passenger pigeon data is scarce, so these nesting location size and number can only be estimated. A single site may cover thousands of acres, and hundreds of nests were found in a single tree. An estimated 136,000 birds nesting in Wisconsin occupied 850 square miles. The nests were about a foot in diameter and made of tiny sticks and twigs. Each nesting produced one white, elongated egg. 12 to 14 days were spent incubating. Both parents fed and incubated the egg. The little bird was born naked and blind, but it developed quickly. Its white, capped feathers resembled an adult female's. It was fed and cared for by the parent birds for 14 days. It was huge and fat by now, weighing more than either of its parents. After growing strong enough, it flew to the ground to find food. Authorities disagree on the passenger pigeon's nesting frequency. The widespread belief was that the birds nested twice a season, although this cannot be verified or disproven because no detailed records of nestings were maintained. During the late summer, flocks of passenger pigeons roamed about at random in the northern woodlands in search of food, but as October neared and temperature variations grew more extreme, the flocks of passenger pigeons started their journey to southern wintering sites. Because passenger pigeons collected in such great numbers, they need extensive forests to survive. When early settlers destroyed the eastern woods for cultivation, The birds were compelled to relocate their breeding and roosting areas to the remaining woodlands. As their woodland food source dwindled, the birds started using farmers' grain fields. Large flocks of passenger pigeons sometimes caused significant agricultural damage, and farmers responded by killing the birds and exploiting them as a source of meat. However, this did not seem to significantly reduce the overall number of birds. The significant decline of passenger pigeons occurred when professional hunters began netting and killing the birds for sale in city marketplaces. Although the birds had been utilized as food for centuries, including by Indians, the actual killing occurred in the 1800s. There were no rules limiting the amount of pigeons killed or the manner in which they were seized. Because the birds were used to living in groups, they were readily captured using baited traps and decoys. The birds were shot at their nesting places, young squabs were knocked out of their nests with long sticks, and pots of burning sulfur were put beneath the roosting trees to daze the birds and cause them to fall to the ground. Hundreds of thousands of passenger pigeons were slaughtered for personal use and market sale, where they were often sold for as low as 50 cents a dozen. In 1878, one of the last significant nestings of passenger pigeons occurred in Petoskey, Michigan. 50,000 birds were slaughtered every day for over 5 months. By the early 1890s, the passenger pigeon was almost vanished. It was now too late to safeguard them via legislation. A measure was submitted in the Michigan legislature in 1897 seeking for a 10-year ban. The passenger pigeon's survival strategy was built on mass tactics. There was safety in its vast flocks, which may number in the hundreds of thousands of birds. When a flock of this size settled in a location, the number of local animal predators, such as wolves, foxes, weasels, and hawks, was so minimal in comparison to the overall number of birds that the flock as a whole suffered little harm. When man became a predator on the flocks, this colonial way of life became very perilous. When the birds were gathered in large numbers, particularly at a nesting place, man could easily massacre them in such large numbers that there were not enough birds remaining to effectively perpetuate the species. The goals of civilization, with its forest clearance and cultivation, were diametrically opposed to the interests of the birds, who relied on the vast woods for survival. The passenger pigeons were unable to adjust to living in tiny groups. When their interests collided with those of man, civilization triumphed. The indiscriminate murder of the birds hastened their extinction. The conversion of forests to farming would have spelled the end of the passenger pigeon. The demise of the passenger pigeon had one positive effect. It heightened public awareness of the need of robust conservation regulations. We have preserved many additional species of migratory birds and fauna as a result of the implementation of these rules. So, that is all for today. We are glad you watched. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon to get notifications of new videos.